Oke.
Wirawari says, fire poker, is this a good spear?
In his why? Oh, I could recount the legends for
Alan
days,
says,
but
fallen Olympian.
I must dispatch someone to the shore now. The Night Regent is indisposed, but Minister Lochner runs day-to-day affairs in Pridewind.
Fast travel. Loading. Please wait. Identity 22 says, love. Abandon mission.
Turun lagi. Siapa yang itu ini? Dika. Topik.
Merkavar says, who puts a time trial above deep water?
Semuanya. Jauh, jauh.
Fast travel. Lungju Senior says, your mouth can't run through it. Cobain says, what's the bis horse charm anyway? Loading. Please wait. Kabaz says, haha merc. Lungju Senior says, maybe haste, but I like the over-encumbered one a lot. Merkavar says, dismounted due to deep water and the shore is too far away. It's a death sentence.
Well now, from across the sim you'll find the inn quite hospitable. I hand-selected the innkeeper 2 decades ago. Check in and have a warm meal. But we will speak again.
Kabaz says, it's happened to me too XD. Chugster says, how much is season pass premium track hotel?
Corruption will claim them all. Warning them is a futile effort. They are blind to the real
Horizon says,
danger all
20
around them.
tokens. Hypemes says, no. Milky T33TS says, like 20 bucks. Chubster says, ah cheers. Chuka says, WTSCD prismatic English prismatic letter.
No, I'm never one to
Operator
turn away.
Yankee says,
No,
about
I
tree
mean, you're always welcome here in the end. But a house offers some amenities. You can furnish the place.
No doubt. We're a place where
Milky
yeah.
T33TS
There's a trading
says,
post out there. Livelier
bonus
market than
20 bucks. Jake Gyllenhaal says, you need the DLC to get LDL 65. Milky T33TS says, yes. Mochis Gracias says, W2144. Hypemes says, not gonna spend money on that bleed. SWC Levi says, what are you supposed to do at the tribal high ground? Schlurpy Susboy says, what's happening here? Operator Yankee says, at SWC Levi kill tribal Darth Vader. Kleider says, brutish exemplary amulet of the century.
Look at you! That sound. I didn't trust all the shite coming out of that watch.
Did you meet with the minister? He will certainly get you started if you like him. Try it.
Donnan says, XDD. Alcasha says, how do I equip purchased mount attachments? Vital says, XCPR. Operator Yankee says, at Alcasha double left click.
Come in and be well. That is good to hear. I believe Serpent, the mines are the backbone of Prideland, where many townspeople earned
Mantis
their
says,
lives,
what?
but had no reports in base. I think
Chuka says, WTSCD prismatic ingot prismatic leather.
Did you find my ID yet? It's going to stop working and get you quickly.
So now she says, oh, you may not be a nut, but You got a match. And if that translates,
Wolf says, did they remove Brazilian skirt and replace it with enchanted board? XNPCX says, soul shroud earring. The Marauders faction has thrown water into a conflict state. They can now declare war. XNPCX says, Tanglobi amulet. Crazy X says, life ring amulet.
I thought I'd never get out of here. Thank you.
P41 says, WTV hardened system.
Everyone is withered! I'm getting out of here!
Elias! He was trying to fight back!
Insert a point says, use trade channel plebs. Kronosama says, act. Javit says, finisher.
For that a mighty grateful, sure enough. I'm not looking to linger here. Eyelids and withers forming all over. Break that tablet and who knows? Maybe all those lost will disperse. Either way I'll go.
Javit says, finisher.
Si Blanca.
Loading. Please wait. Leontic says, L21. HETT0 says, pull. Says, dreadful knell of the soldier. SSSTUCKSSS says, where should I farm tank gear? Who says, featherweight. Insert a point says, global is not trade, use and grow. Shasha says, thank you. Black says, Ark. Should Flying Camel says, Hang OM. Queen Bee says, where are you up to? Makasi says, X. Chubster says, Moner L. Wachek1 says, GGS. Says, Sash kinda lonely. Insert A1 says, MSQ still broke, as on staff but about typical AGS. Says, not to bag on our questions. Cheats for control of Greek water. Magic Thumb says, I got my Azov staff back by very MING the game then checking my stash. Insert A-Point says, nah it went walkabout after finishing just completed the Tempest Spark MSQ. Cheeky Bandit says, anyone stopping the flag and stuttering. Insert A-Point says, no. Sonata Mayan says, T5 staff is before Tempest if I recall correctly. Chubster says, oh sick. Chubster says, so I can run 700 straight. Somebody says, water wash. Insert point says, no. Chubster says, underscore. Says, stop. LBT33TS says, leave me alone. Obviously hasn't played in Roger says, at Chubster you can get Felix Lobel says, syncretic fire staff. Warren G. Kato P says, XD. Crux says, I'm at break. Crux says, stick fish. Crux says, eat some food raw. Crux says, cheers life. Says, L144. Crux says, sweat from brandy after 50-hour lunch. Says, L2144. Crux says, present layer. Kukudilla says, 24,430. C1X says, L2144. Crux says, Crux says, L2144. Laser K11 says, MP9000 says, Garox says, loading. Please wait. Izino says, thanks. Leave group. I dictator says, hey. Insert a coin says, 420 days. Insert a coin says, come at me. Reiser G says, X-rays. Cycloid Gamma says, okay but hear me out. What if the balls got hard too? Rysine says, RGF. Mr. Gober says, LF1M Healer M1 Starstone. The 2 Yen says, WTB Weapon Matrix DM. Reaflex says, Artisan Jewel Crafters with WTS. Wallygator says, Heart. Jahi says, Vivify, is this okay or do I really need sacred? Crux says, free Everfall, free Palestine. C Cups says, TTV / the old Kiwi Evan push open world, then WF war. Do you want a new card? Samuel Husband says, tut. Luna Blackbird says, XCPR. Insert a coin says, and closing global chat, you all are idiots, smiley face. Cycloid Gamma says, killing everything. Chip Tyler says, X-rays. Nocturnal says, quests. Cycloid Gamma says, not me. Error code XI says, free Ghost Mlanya dogs. Bob Cool Pro says, X-rays. Black Marsh says, freaking shot. The 2 Yen says, WTV Weapon Matrix DM. VL Spectre says, where are we starting? Recall to in. Lap 1018 says, X-rays. Horizon says, loading. Please wait. Mama M1 Ya says, X-rays. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank heal DPS to lobby. Flute says, where my homie talk. Big Silk 1 says, LFM Tempest heart rate need healer GF. Horizon says, it's been a minute. Cycloid Gamma says, free talk. GG Schmidta says, 123. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank DPS to lobby. Cycloid Gamma says, yous didn't know. Tog is in bleed jail. Soon says, X-rays. Stitch says, at Hannah Jung you want a tank? Little Enet says, XCPR.
Yes, honey! Honey's so delicious, it's called Devil's Honey. I have a special reserve up on Uriah Looking. Collect my honeycombs and I'll give you some to taste.
Rainbow Paddle Pop says, X-rays. Sinurik says, Sinurik has reached level 42. Kenneth says, WTS as off inductor craft weapon / armor / NG, PM your price. Gerald Merrick says, LF temp M2 need all. Chip Tyler says, X-rays. Bob Cool Pro says, X-rays. 2.6 Hawk Cycle says, Spear of the Soldier WTS BMO. Stropsis says, Stropsis has reached level 10. Akbon John IV says, X. Humphrey Malone says, WTS Weapon Matrix X3, 13.75 KEA. Carmi says, WTS BMO Dark Leather Adventurer's Satchel Mithril Plate Boots of the Century.
I'm glad to see
Ninja
you.
Lighty says,
How you have
LF Tank
disappointed
M2
us.
Star Scone,
Good question.
GM.
Perhaps it slipped his mind with all the preparations Mr. Boyd.
Cobbsy says, Cobbsy has reached level 8. Lady Mayonnaise says, X-rays. Bravo 123 says, X-rays. Juka says, Ancient Great Axe of the Barbarian WTS. Ted Plays says, LF1 MSSM1 Healer. Mama M1 Ya says, X-rays. Yeats says, X-rays. Winter AES today says, X-rays. Aprasia says,
Oh, by all means,
X-rays.
tell her I will come
Shothouse
as soon as I
says,
finish my
WTV Inductor Armoring. Chip Tyler says, X-rays /. Izino says, help Amarine Expedition. Black Marsh says, X-rays. Alzheimer says, WTS woodworker's shoes. Rukalo says, is Amreen look still bugged? Fish Dynasty says, Fish Dynasty has reached level 13. Rukalo says, asterisk.
I have already
BPI says, Hesperian sandals of the Ranger WTS. Kindergard says, exemplary earring of the Sage WTSPM. Crux says, where we going Brandos? Opeshanov says, Azov inductor WTS jewel craft. Bob Coolproy says, X-rays. LKG.Hanshin says, X-rays. Gerald Merrick says, LF Temp M2 need healer and tank. U Agnes says, X. Taurus says, X-rays. Gloom Shadow says, Gloom Shadow has reached level 31. Ghost Soldier says, X-rays. Bino says, X-rays. Rysine says, RG at, place order. Jelper says, corrupted leather coat of the scholar WTS. Potato Plays says, where's Lion Lords? L3 Thal says, LFMM2 Starstone. Monkey Boo Boo says, WTS Mithril Ring of the Scholar, Mithril Ring of the Scholar. Izino says, Amarine please help, laughing face. Bent Spine says, everything is still bugged, they only care about season pass. Jasmine says, LF2 DPS temp red. Rukalo says, yikes. Tomblock says, Tomblock skips a gleamite. Wreckrage says, LF Rake Starstone healer / tank / damage. Orange Kato P says, tut. C Cups says, TTV / the old Kiwi PvP and DNB, laughing face. Humphrey Malone says, WTS Weapon Matrix X3, 13.5 KEA. Lady Mayami says, X. Blackwood says, NEG. Yeats says, WTF is up with the teleporting BS. Jasmine says, LF2 DPS temp reg. Required rename says, LF tank, heals, 1 DPS SSM2 GF Gagago. Mithrilder says, LFNE DPS / tank. Jukanot says, X. GOL.D.Roger.Raj says, WTB Light Gear, GS700, Enchanted Ward Shirking Health Flame Harnessing. FZ3RO says, you both after the LS. Lady Mayami says, X. I Ain't Lion says, attack south. Melba22 says, he'll come. Gerald Merrick says, LF Temp M2 need healer. L3 Thal says, LFMM2 Starstone need healer and tank. Lady Mayami says, X-rays please. Rysine says, X-rays. K4N3.th says, K4N3.th has reached level 13. WiseD says, arcade boots of the Sage WTS some insane focus boots DMO. Risky says, S corrupted cloth shirt of the soldier seething hellbrand of the sentry ancient longsword of the soldier voids reach of the scholar ancient longsword of the ranger. Lottie says, XCPR 310s. L3 Thal says, LFMM2 Starstone need healer and tank. Yut says, WTS Jewel Azoth Inductor. Wild Funky Fishhawk says, XCPR. Required rename says, LF Tank Heals M2SSGF. Wild Funky Fishhawk says, XCPR. Jan34 says, XCPR. Yomama I says, XCPR. Arts Hania says, WTS Armor Azoth Inductor 50k. Mad Munza says, XCPR. Crit Pop says, any corruption portal farm groups going. Princess Hannah says, Mithril Ring of the Century WTSG. I Need Name says, Mithril Ring of the Sage WTS. FZ3RO says, getting everything but the LSLOL. Just the Gam says, XCPR. L3 Thal says, LFMM2 Starstone need healer and tank. Rysine says, X-Race. Smorn says, XCPR. Chunks2 says, Azoth Inductor WTS Armor Craft. Jasmine says, LF1M Tank or DPS Rectam. Lil Jeff 34 says, where is Adiana's Joe's Beast found? Is says, X. It's my second day says, X-Race. Chris I says, attack south. Timeless Trek says, chosen beast is all the way behind. Free.Orlac says, X-Race. It's D Wonder Time says, X-Race. Chris I says, group up at Femoral. Required rename says, LF Tank Heals M2SSGF. Pantiahari Kayamat says, oh I Satoru. I ain't lying says, attack south. Intimacy I says, X-Race. Lady Mayami says, X-Race. Pokebum FAP says, X-Scorp. Sink-chan says, is there a race ATM? Surprised face, Zero Prodenfreeze says, GF. Mhano says, any weaponspo groups? Servo says, LF Soul Shroud set group. L3 Thal says, LFMM2 Starstone need healer and tank. Janjarong says, WTB Jewelry Matrix 13k. Orange Kato P says, big guys. Wise D says, archaic boots of the sage, what would you price these at? Sorrow Knight says, LFMDPS Empyrean Forge. Kuputkla says, Gonberry. Fizz says, X-Scorp. Yaman 2020 says, how long? Lanky says, Weapon Matrix WTS 12k. Servo says, LF Elite Mob Farm in Shattered Mudin. JUANLTO says, XCPRMYRK. Kanga says, make you guys vote no. Oregon says, fast travel. Would you like to fast travel? Chad Wunker says, WTS Orichalcum Brutish Vow of the Ranger Brutish Exemplary Amulet of the Soldier Brutish Infused. Loading. Please wait. Ace Gun says, XECR. It's D1 your time says, www. Kanai says, X Scorp. Ursiscon says, X Scorp. Zombek1 says, X Scorp. Sinjianangia says, X Scorp. Ben says, Chen 160k. Lumi says, LF2MM1 Tempest, Healer and DPS, in GF. Zelino says, X Scorp.
In place of
Jim
they must
says-
hardly left me with nothing.
Ben
But you're
says, Chen 160kh. 6GZL Sniping says, 6GZL Sniping. Pete says, what is your best armor split when using a blue leather pants? Light armor roll. Ben says, one a roll. Ben says, Chen. It's D1 the time says, X-rays. Ben says, for me. Jinx2 says, Humphrey Malone says, WTS Weapon Matrix X3, 13.5 KEA. Damn Daniel says, X Scorp. Jinx2 says, Jinx2 rolls a 5. Shinkaru says, X Scorp. Ursiscon says, X Scorp. Sushib says, Adip Stugalit. 5 Pui says, X Scorp. Pai says, X Scrop. Laser K11 says, X Scorp. Milky T33TS says, medium boots, gloves, or head. L3 Thal says, LFMM2 Starstone need tank. Kratos Gremory says, yeah. Stay I Frost I says, LF Healer M2 Tempest GF. iPhone was my idea says, XCPR. 41Y says, Pendulous WTS. Wanu says, X Scrop. OLAGYI says, as often Dr. WTS Weaponsmith. Chief. DMO. Stay I Frost I says, LF Healer M2 Tempest GF. Reflex says, Artisan Jewel Crafters with WTS. Burning Step says, at deeps any other piece besides chest. Seeks 123 says, holy scammer don't pot. Nasdas says, LF3M heal /tank /DPS to go, Amri. Murboss says, hello. Wiseby says, bleep WTS BMO. I have magic says, teleporting away from the fun is the best. Unholy Volcut says, Forge Alpha Brutish Fire Staff of the Scholar WTS 6K. Princess Hannah says, Oolapis Void Beds. OOLAGYI says, Seek always see 322 cubic meters. Don't go with the I'm sticking out. Psycho says, Profane Boots of the Sage WTS Healer Boots. Stay I Frost I says, LF Healer M2 Tempest GM. L3 Doll says, LFMM2 Starstone need tank. L3 Doll says, LFMM2 Starstone need tank. Janjaron says, Matrix 1310. Rising says, X-rays. It's James says, WTB Prismatic Leather Prismatic Cloth. Snip PD says, LF1M Healer Tempest M1GF. ARCHETT0 says, Ancient Leather Boots of the Century WTS 25K. Mythrilder says, any GF all rolls. Karika says, any elite runs going. And 30 Switch says, exemplary ring of the scholar, exemplary ring of the good WTS GPM. H0P says, Scorpion Sting. Joshi number 1 says, as often Dr. WTS 50K. Vine GF2K says, LF2MM2 Tempest, need DPS /10. Deo says, Jinx2 says, as often Dr. WTS. Jinx2 says, armor. Uran says, endless thirst. Nasdos says, LF3M heal /tank /DPS to go, Amri. Nike says, as often Dr. WTS. Salino says, X musket farm. ZY Rips says, I got the artifact for it. Buying GFUK says, LF1MM2 Tempest, Neat Tank. Matt Goose says, Raid Card for Worm. Abu Ishmael says, Dark Matter. Nasdas says, LF3 Enfield/tank/DPS to go, M3. L3 Thal says, LFMM2 Scarstone need healer. Doram Shot says, teleported out. XD. D4RK0WNZ says, Turk Bar my lot. Melpiina says, LFM tank/DPS dynasty. Lil Jeff 34 says, Cool gloves. Lady Naomi says, yeah, that's what's happening when all goes south. Pravi says, LFG Tempest M3. Matt Goose says, X for Worm. March 16 says, 10,086. Strange Z says, Photo. And Gadan Gok says, Pattern, logging clothing pattern, skinning clothing WTSPMO. Rosine says, Go Soul equals auto TP to city WTF. Primal Chicken says, X Worm. Buying GF2K says, LF1MM2 Tempest, Need Tank. Scout says, X Worm. Hyperstion says, X Worm. Lucy IF3RX says, X Worm. Wally Gator says, X Worm. Lucy IF3RX says, X Worm. Maritazi says, X Worm. Trauma 1906 says, X Worm. Versus Con says, X Worm. Glitch Storm says, X Worm. Forever 4D says, X Worm. L3 Thal says, L3 Starstone need healer. Humphrey Malone says, WTS Weapon Matrix X2 13.5 KEA. Sinjianangia says, is there a disc for Worm or just Pug Chaos? Big Jab says, X Worm. Marcus Antonios says, X Scorp. Aritazi says, X Worm. Lucy IF3RX says, X Worm. Trauma 1906 says, X Worm. Shoxy says, LFDPS Ray Tempest. And 30 Switch says, Pattern, weaving clothing WTS and a piece. Third 24 says, X Worm. Buying GF2K says, LF1MM2 Tempest, Need Tank. Big Jab says, X Worm. Aritazi says, X Worm. B3 Shed says, X Worm. Magic Cauldron says, X Race Raid. C4T Dog says, LF2MDPS He says, LF1MM1 Tempest, need healer in GF. Melpiina says, LFM tank/DPS dynasty. It's Tupac says, WTB adamant. Artrial says, X-Race. Copy 10 says, exemplary earring of the soldier WTSDMO 25KC/O. Janjerong says, WTB jewelry matrix 13K. L3 Thal says, LFM Starstone need healer. Kent Learer says, push the flag. JUANLTO says, XCPR. Kent Learer says, North Eden push the point. Terrible the G says, WTB adamant. Buying GF2K says, LF1MM2 Tempest, need tank. Hawaii says, XCPR. Shoxy says, LF2 DPS Tempest Reg, Codex Run GF. TR1 says, XCPR. Matt Goose says, 1520X for Worm. Patent number 1 says, XCPR. Nasdas says, LF3M deal/tank/DPS to go, Emry. Wimpy Wisp says, XCPR. OOLAGYI says, WTV Prismatic Ink installed PO. TR1 DPA says, XCPR. Sugar says, X-Worm. Carothin says, X-Worm. Triglyceride says, XCRP. At number 1
Now,
says
now they work.
XCPR.
Fred,
Triglyceride says
opportunity abounds.
XCPR.
look around and you'll
TR1PPA
find
says
prospects for coin.
XCPR.
Once you have a
Recall
home,
to in.
use the furniture I give you. Create your own space. Then return, for more work remains to be done.
Loading. Please wait. C4T Dog says LF2MDPSNE at GF. C4T Dog says LF1MDPSNE at GF. Shoxy says LF1DPS Tempest, Codex 1. And Cox says X-Worm. Erica says X-Worm. Caro X says WTS Prismatic Heat and Letter C. Bubbo X says X-Worm. Anna Young says SDM3 Tank to Lobby. Normative Pinto says X-Worm. Orangey Kato P says LOL. Scaramushi says X-Worm. Hazelnut says Triple Ice. Nasdos says LF3M heal /tank /DPS DC3 Spat 3S says 3 minutes only I bet. Jinx2 says DPS armor. Skyater002 says did they figure out the this patch? Stitch says at Hannah I'm so sorry IDC. Kissing face. L3 Doll says 1 DPS and 2 star. Bones Bra says XPVP. Terrible the G says WTV Adamant PM. AP says XCPR. Shoxy says 1 DPS Red S Red. Codex Run GM. He says X. Magic Hallway says, X Upper Hallway Raid. Nobby says, has off Inductor WTS Armor. Jenko Fett says, X PvP Race. Benny Sparks says, WTS Major Armoring Crafting Trophy X3. Funds Police says, X PvP. Nasdos says, LF3M heal /tank /DPS to go, Emery. Deja Vu LL says, LF1M tank test 2 Gagago. Oix says, how do I start Brimstone MSQ? Kiki I says, you bleed. Kiki I says, laughing face. Carmi says, XPVP. Hannah Young says, SDM3 tank to lobby. Nasdos says, LF3M heal /tank /DPS to go, Emery. El Ray D. Eternus says, how to kill a mob when you can't see the mob ha. B3 Shen says, X-Worm. El Ray D. Eternus says, this game. Noppies says, as off Inductor WTS Armor. Simon says, skill issue. Alien Ren says, X-Worm. Rookalo says, does luck gear increase or chance at Legos from chests? Alien Ren says, X-Worm DPS. Laugh 1018 says, X-Race. Army says, X-Race. Sing Chan says, purple and yellow partying in even grove or something. Snorlax 5G says, nope at Rookalo. Dominic02 says, XPVP. Wisely says, doesn't Bleak feel like it? Snorlax 5G says, only increase the chance you getting named items. Scorpidrom0N says, Alt F4 usually fixes visual bugs when you can't see mobs. This says, X-Worm. Wisely says, I get worse luck with luck gear on than not. Epic Smile says, corrupted heart Warhammer of the soldier. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank to lobby. Scorpidrom0N says, Ikr. Captain Coop says, Soul of Mercard. Blydia says, any group farm in Mercard? Sir Nettington says, X-Worm DPS. Ronnie Yeoman says, X-Worm DPS. Blydia says, any group farm in Mercard? Terrible the G says, WTV help mod. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank lobby. Miss Well says, pattern, skinning clothing WTS. Who says, Sovereign infused silk shoes of the Sentry Aerogene Great Axe of the Soldier or Jalco Brutish Great Axe of the Soldier WTS GPMO. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Lydia says, any group farm in Mercard? Aboeng says, X-Worm DPS. Stephen says, LF1M DPS SSB. Nastas says, LF2M tank and DPS to go, Amreen. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Jonghyun says, X-Worm. Caro X says, WTS prismatic ingot and leather CD. Nastas says, LF2M tank and DPS to go, Amreen. Delocious says, LF1 DPS SSM3.
Excellent.
Timotheus7 says, LF1M tank SSM1 already inside. Funeralistic says, X-Rays. Karaka says, X-Merc. Lydia says, any group farm in Mercard? That cousin says, WTS pattern, engineering clothing pattern, jeweler clothing. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank.
There's my honey.
Says, X-Rays.
My honey best is
Friendly Baker
short.
and W
Grab
says,
as many jars by the
X-Rays.
air. Bring flowers fair.
Nastas says, LF2M tank and DPS to go, Amreen. Blydia says, any group farm in Mercard? Puputla says, oh I Murayama. Jenko Pet says, X-Rays. Sminny says, Orichalcum Brutish Rapier of the Brigand WTS. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Crit Pop says, any Mercard farms if so fast. XR says, Mercard blocks. And 30 Switch says, exemplary rank loading. Please wait. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Nastas says, LF1M tank for DPS to go, Amreen. Damn Daniel says, LFM Tempest M1. CYW001 says, peace. Eat God says, Spell of the Ranger WTS. Tella says, LF2M, SSM2, DPS. Daddy GE says, Breaching Heavy Skirt of the Ranger WTS BMO. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Hellyoung Brother says, WTS corrupted boots of the Barbarian Brutish infused silk shoes of the Sage BMO. Wiseby says, archaic boots of the Sage, WTS some craft boots, hell, Uwid, and slash pop BMO. Gamunkel says, WTS Azov Inductor, Armorer. Ozik says, XCPR. Wiseby says, Mage's Wet Dream, Laughing Face. Drosser Diana says, rejoice, we can dye the short shorts again. UXIXTH Sigma skirt of the century. Caracas says, X-Merc. Midrilder says, WTS Arboreal defiled hatchet of the soldier ice gauntlet of the scholar. Humphrey Malone says, WTS weapon matrix X3 13.25 KEA.
Before, the Ninth Regent seems to think very highly of you, as do I. You have the makings of a great knight.
Rift Zone says, slow. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Nasdas says, LF1M tank or DPS to go, Amreen. Fayathi says, LF2M SD tank DPS EM. Azik says, XCPR. Natura says, XCPR. Nanodasuwa says, WTS honing acid. Gamunkel says, Minor Gloves GS700 WTS DMO. Karmakz Ninja says, LF1M Healer M2 Tempting. And Ganan Gok says, Bleed WTS DMO. Smorn says, WTS Chromatic Seal Armor. Triglyceride says, XCPR. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Jonathan says, XCPR. Natura says, XCPR. GOL.D.Roger.Raj says, Primeval Helm of the Century WTS. Arkbark says, Can I come Amreen? Lap 1018 says, X-Rays. Leanne Springs says, Exemplary Ring of the Sage WTS BMO Bleep. Zis says, Spinweave Gloves of the Scholar Spinweave Boots of the Scholar WTS. Terrible the G says, WTB Animate / Healthcraft Mob. Doris says, How long does this race go for? GOL.D.Roger.Raj says, Tainted Gloves of the Sage WTS. Jenko Pet says, XPVP. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Karmakz Ninja says, LF1M M2 Temp and GF. Bob Cool Pro says, X-Rays. Uix says, LFMMYRK named ads farm 110. Sonata Mayan says, 45 minutes at most. Owen Unleashed says, How do you fish again? Gerald Merrick says, LFM2 Tempest need DPS and tank. Ardler says, WTS light glove health / shirking heel / gravity well. Bo 200k spinweave gloves of the century. Scorpidrom 0N says, F3. Yoix says, LFMMYRK named ads farm 110. Owen Unleashed says, Tuh. Scorpidrom 0N says, All G. Oix says, XMYRK. Taurus says, Do you get anything from it at the end? Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Geotop Leo says, 2M7. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Karmakz Ninja says, LF1M Healer M2 Temp and GF. DRHO0N says, XMYRK Farm. Caracas says, X. Yoix says, LFMMYRK named Ads Farm 310s. Yoix says, LFMMYRK named Ads Farm 410s. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 tank. Shrew says, X.point. XCar says, Join MYRKPLS. ZYW001 says, Peace. Caro X says, WTB Weapon Matrix. LE Black says, Voracious Bone Mender of the Sage WTS 150k. Mang T0 Moss says, WTB 700 GS miners 4k each. Azik says, LFMCPRX. Gerald Merrick says, LFM2 Tempest need DPS and tank. Little Love says, XCPR. Lydia says, WTS Piersomatic CD, Azoth Inductor Armor. Walligator says, XCPR. King WIIM says, XMYRK. Goix says, LFMMYRK named adds farm 5/10. Dexamphetamine says, XMYRK. Eddie.Memento says, XCPR. Geotoglio says, LF2M Tank DPS Savage Divine. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Nanodisumo says, WTS Owning Acid. Stanas says, X. Gerald Merrick says, LFM2 Tempest Need Tank. Ozik says, LFMCPRX. Scout says, XCPR. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Hamlet is good says, S. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Joix says, LFMMYRK named adds farm 6/10. WIIM says, XMYRK. Mirdox says, LFM Tank Starstone M1. Z3R0 Sidop says, XMYRK. Terrible the G says, WTF Adamant / Help Mod PM. Atad Sketchy says, LF Tank M1 Starstone. Ozzy says, LFMCPRX. Mirdox says, LFM Tank Starstone M1. Atad Sketchy says, LF Tank M1 Starstone GF. 6007 says, anyone know where is the best location for rawhide? FKNY Life says, Hannah's house. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Fish Dynasty says, Fish Dynasty has reached level 14. Izino says, LFM. Mirdox says, LFM Tank Starstone M1. Joix says, LFMMYRK named as farm 7/10. Lydia says, Brutish Exemplary Amulet of the Century WTS. Tel Bluton says, around Fort Bravos. Mirdox says, LFM Tank Starstone M1.
Indeed.
Cockham 3 says,
Set their rowboats adrift and
Hannah
we'll
Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Chris Cat says, let's talk. Eclipse says, Engineer Shirt Smelters Headgear Chef Pants WTS. TTV Stinky Gator says, X-Race PLS.
What are you waiting for?
Roizel says, Exemplary Earring of the Century WTS BMO. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Rocky says, Basalt Conductor WTS GPF Armor. Crying Face, XX Normandy XX says, WTS Major Armor and Crafting Trophy Expert. Mirdox says, LFM Tank Starstone M1. Trick Pop says, XMYRK. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. GOL.D.Roger.Raj says, Primeval Helm of the Century WTS. Calm BIM says, OK Thailand. Karen says, WTV Help Mod. Glory Xella says, WTV Jewel Matrix. Gur1Y says, Pendulous Poet Martyr and Memorial Cloth Pants of the Century WTS. Aleda69 says, LFM Dynasty Shipyard Regular 3/5. Vestalax says, Void Damage Better for PvP. Ormond says, Xmalef. Luke says, LFMMYRK named adds farm 8/10. Ozik says, LFMCPRX. Elizabeth says, at all G-Man. Leanne Springs says, Ring of the Sage WTS PMO bleep ends 12 PM. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Who says, LF Tank Normless. Itsunen says, XCPR. Arthur says, WTS Light Glove Help / Shirking Heel / Gravity Well. Bo 200K Spinleaf Gloves of the Century. Islam Makakev says, X-Race. Scout says, XCPR. Yerlina says, X-Rapier. Terrible the G says, WTV Adamant / Health Mod. Agents Zero Lid says, L2144. Hannah says, SDM3 Tank. Hannah Jung says, SDM3 Tank. Bogus the third says, L2144. Kyoix says, LFMNYRK named as barmaid tense. Aleda69 says, LFM shipyard normal. Param01D says, XCPR. Scion of Iron says, are tigers faster than horses? Piety says, LF1M tank SD is GM. All behind says, XCPR. Aritazi says, XCPR. Horizon says, no. Nozomi0 says, blood drinker. Piety says, GPS. Scion of Iron says, okay just feels like it. Error code XI says, L Lil Todgers. Mxmarta says, XCPR. Islam Makakev says, X-Race. Carmi says, anyone capping WW Fort? Terrible the G says, WTB Adamant Health Mod PM. Wanwu says, XCPR. Big Doctor says, XCPR. Simp4U says, Major Loot Luck Trophy X2 WTS19 page. Yoix says, LFMMYRK named as barmaid tense. Aleda69 says, LFM shipyard. Thor1Y says, timeless amulet shard X17 each 500. Adam says, WTB X1 armoring trophy PM price. Big Mac Mimi says, wants to play with me. Izino says, Amarine Expedition need one more to start. Shinsekai Jin says, I am Zoe says, blood drinker. M. Louis says, sick. Simulator says, Sushib says, YTF do I keep randomly teleporting? Women Terrify Me says, X-Rays. Kyoix says, LFMMYRK named as barmaid tense. Rysine says, Nibunker. Cruz Lorenzo says, bug all time. Peach Slug says, X-Ray. Sinjianangia says, wish you could give people marks. Covenant faction has thrown Eden Grove into a conflict. They can now declare war. Crucial says, XCPR wall. Chris Vi says, GG. Dominic02 says, X-Rays. Carmi says, WTSDMO Dark Leather Adventurer Satchel Mithril Plate Boots of the Century. Rangery says, X-Rays. Rysine says, GG. Biggs says, LFMMYRK barmaid tense. Magic Cauldron says, Morningdale in Boutique. Sovereign Zero Any says, XMYRK named farm. A company in Covenant has declared war on Eden Grove, the final warring company to be determined in 10M. Nate says, plus. Sergeant Lemon says,
Oh, bravo,
nice
Bible! She insisted
player.
she was here
Suck.
scouting the place.
Sergeant Lemon says, no one said it ever to me yes.
Pray more. And furthermore, selling goods at market may be enough for some folks,
Brass
but it's
telescope.
too slow for me. I loosened lips at the tavern until I heard about
Cause
these
I
pirates.
strikes back
Then I
says,
came for the
no,
lips.
what's
And
wrong,
this
sweetheart?
suspicious sod, that's the only
Recall
reason
to
I'm
me.
here.
Our guest says, looks like he found that bag. Kyoix says, LFMMYRK named ads farm 9/10. Loading. Please wait. Doppel says, defiled great acts of the soldier. TR33O says, XMYRK. Momongo says, this crafter is here. Anakin says, WTBX1 armoring trophy. Krulwiz says, A. Crit Pop says, INV. Carmi says, WW 5%. C Cups says, TTV / the old Kiwi PvP and DNB, WF War attacking army POV. Sink Chan says, fake Twitch link gave me a virus. Krulwiz says, WTS 3 meter gold. Crucialayu says, remember LimeWire days? Lewis says, LFMMYRK named ads farm 10/20ths. Deovich 6688 says, archaic hat of the barbarian immemorial leather boots of the scholar. Deovich 6688 says, immemorial leather gloves of the sage. Freed Ostrich says, LF3 Tempest regular. Wayne Exa says, XCPR. Servo says, XMYRK. Rysine says, XCPR. Saz High says, what the bleep. Big Jab says, XCPR. B1 Kinkerdos says, what? Siri Alphys says, XMYRK. Toasty says, X-Race MD. Simon says, Kiwi or Q. Magic Cauldron says, X-Race MD. Squid Salad says, XMYRK. Damn Daniel says, XMYRK. Anapon China says, hello, can I get into the company please see? Dominiso says, X-Race. Fisk 3RR says, X-Race. Ardler says, WTS light glove help / shirking heel / gravity well.
Grab me the best sword.
200k spin weave gloves of the century. Milkus Maximus says, XMYRK. JORIWZ says, XMYRK. Fisk 3RR says, X-Race. Gilai says, WTS blank CD. Kyoix says,
Now that you have
LFMMYRK
joined our
named ads
cause,
farm
you
15/20.
must carry the light into
X
the world at
Sujiwuji
every
says,
chance.
X
Missions
Sujiwuji
are
has reached
available
level 8.
anytime.
You are guilty says, X-Race. Ralph2449 says,
Yeah, I
XMYRK.
can feel the party
Moody
coming
says,
on
Air
already.
voice. Gilai says, WTS bis ancient life staff of the sage 100kc/O. Hexkay says, rapier of the ranger empowered hatchet of the soldier Hesperian void gauntlet of the scholar great axe of the ranger WTS. Magic Cauldron says, no PT for MD race. Jordias says, XMYRK. Braxis says, Braxis has reached level 8. Crucialayu says, X-Race. Ralph2449 says, XMYRK. Schmickbud says, looking for chilled company. Fisk 3RR says, X-Race. Isfan says, XMYRK. Secret says, XMYRK. Krynex says, XMYRK. Milkus Maximus says, XMYRK. Scout says, XMYRK. Smarta says, XMYRK. Rainbow Paddle Pop says, we need a server-wide agreement that after the race is done we all collect bags. Amical says, XMD. Peach Slug says, X. Deja Vu LL says, anyone wanna play Siren tuning orb? Ralph2449 says, XMYRK. Fisk 3RR says, X-Race. King Cat says, agree. Pio says, XMYRK. Walligator says, XMYRK. JCARS says, back. Deja Vu LL says, anyone wanna play Siren tuning orb? Heidi says, XMYRK. Sminny says, breaching gloves of the Ranger WTS. King Cat says, it should auto-loot them into the chest and give to player at end of race. Mac says, XMYRK. Scorpid drops and says, XCPR. Numtox says, AHH good artist mission bugged XD. L Big Trev says, LF1M tank Empyrean Forge. King Cat says, no doubt lost a bunch of legendary bags. iPhone was my idea says, XMYRK. Pi says, XMYRK. Gaim says, S. Biggest Bomb says, XMYRK. Vinton says, XCPR. Ralph2449 says, XMYRK. Jordios says, XMYRK. Pi says, XMYRK. Milkus Maximus says, XMYRK. Kyoix says, LFMMYRK named ads farm 16/20ths. Marshall Herald says, XCPR. Crucial AU says, how do we actually sign up for a race? Toasty says, X Race MD. Blightia says, XMYRK. Ralph2449 says,